Language barriers are only as big as you make them, I think, because what we can really do is most of the times the families live their whole lives in an English dominant society. So they come up with strategies to be able to go to the doctor's office or to be able to go to the clinic or to be able to shop at the grocery store or to do anything in their daily lives. So understanding where they find the language barrier coming in and then how we're just connecting with them and the affect. You can travel in different countries and make great relationships with people and not have a common language just by the way that you present yourself and invite people in. So the most important thing to decrease that language barrier is to create a welcoming environment. And also having people available on staff that can communicate with them, and even if it's not somebody on staff, then bringing somebody in from the district to make sure that all of their conferences are translated. Because one of the big things with a conference is that anytime I schedule conferences, I would always have a translator available. The amount of times that parents would use them wouldn't be as high as we expected it sometimes, and at other times they'd be really high, because what I never want a parent to feel is that they have to rely totally on their son or daughter to be able to translate for them. Because if there is a hard conversation to have and nobody else understands the information being conveyed, we don't know what that parent is getting as opposed to what the kid is giving. So make sure that you have a translator available, and plan for that in your budget. Is crucial. The other thing is when we do any kind of communication that is online, so say we're doing our emails, our auto calls, our text messages, looking at your demographics in the school, I would translate everything from a text message that was 5 sentences to an email that was a page long at the end of the week. And just having that so that the parent can read them themselves is important. And it's creating a welcoming environment to say your language is as valued as English is, and we're going to do our best to be able to make sure that you feel welcome. I happen to be bilingual, so that was a benefit that I had as a school administrator, and our school secretary is bilingual. So that, between the two of us, we were able to field a lot of the questions and creating that welcome environment through language for the Spanish-speaking parents. But I couldn't do that for the Vietnamese, and I couldn't do that for Hmong, and so I did have to go outside sometimes and bring in translators when it was necessary. And I'd talk to the families about it, and I'd ask them what they wanted. So just that helps. It's just because there's a difference in language doesn't mean there has to be a barrier. One of the ways that we that I have worked with language barriers to help students and families that are currently disconnected get more connected to the schools was through a program called the Academic Parent Teacher Teams, APTT, and it's run by West Ed. And through this program, they work a lot on establishing a parent liaison that creates a community group of parents that are involved to be able to have academic parent-teacher team meetings. One way that I found that this worked really effectively, and it doesn't have to go through APTT, but the way that it has worked really effectively is when you create those more informal relationships with some of the parent community. A lot of times those people are people that have more time and are connectors. So they can start to communicate your message and your school to those parents that are disconnected. Also, the availability of information. As a technology and assessment coordinator, one of my jobs was to increase that parent communication, and we did that by over 80% just by using our computer programs that we had within the school systems more effectively, and then we also translated those messages. Right now in the state of Colorado, because I did just look this up again, we do have, at the elementary level, you have native-born ELLs, like a higher percentage of native-born ELLs. So those people are familiar with the cultural part, or they're more likely familiar with culture in being in the United States. In the secondary, you have a higher number of foreign-born ELLs, so they might not be as much in touch with the actual culture. So understanding who you're trying to get connected as well is important, because you don't know whether it's culture, you don't know if it's language, you don't know if it's time and general employment. So kind of trying to understand who that target population is too, if they're disconnected, is really important in the way that you outreach. So part of the problem with students and parents not being connected to school is if you look at our graduation rate for the Latino population, Spanish-speaking population in the state of Colorado being at 58.7% currently. And when I was teaching 8 years ago and developing a college readiness course for that ESL population, that statistic was the same. So that is the problem when people aren't connected. So there is, if we're not graduating almost 40% of our kids, like, that's a problem. And that's at the high school level. But what happens is the trend goes from elementary, where you have higher engagement, into middle school where it steeply declines, into high school where it's even less. So a couple of things that we've done is just switch conferences and the way that we run conferences to different times in the day, going from 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes till 8 o'clock at night, and then letting teachers schedule those around their families and what their family needs are. Is one way to get it because of work schedules and things like that. Another thing is that we really gave the kids the onus on those conferences, so it wasn't parent and teacher, it was a student-directed conference, so that the student would then pressure the parent into coming and saying, hey, I really want to present this information to you, and they own it, and then the teacher is able to engage in a conversation where it's not, hey, come in, I'm going to talk to you, and you're going to listen and receive information. It becomes more of a learning opportunity and an opportunity for that kid to really show what they're learning, and then the teacher to be able to, to engage in that conversation around what the child needs and where there could be deficiencies or real strengths, and both. One of the things that I found a lot working with Latino families is that you have to have a conversation with them. You can't just start off with all the facts. It gets really intimidating, and it's not the way that they generally, not all the time, but saying like, hi, how are you? How is your family? Like doing some of those relational things before you get into hard conversations oftentimes make them more readily engaged throughout the conversation and throughout the relationship, really, because that's what you're trying to build.